Hey everybody, Nick here, and today I got a review for you of this little guy right here, which is little, but also not little. This is the We Knives Thug. But first off, actually, I want to thank We Knives for sending this guy along. I actually reached out to them, seeing, a bunch of people saying, oh, Thug looks great. And, when a bunch of people are saying, wow, this looks amazing, that's often something I want to check out. It's usually a sign of that there's some excellence for somebody out there. So I asked them about it. They said, sure, of course. But as always, I told them I'm going to talk about the good, the great, the bad, and the ugly. It might be a gem, it might be junk. They did still send it along. Nonetheless, we have to assume this is the very best quality controlled one of these guys ever, and I'm doing my best not to let that affect the nature or the quality of my review. Next thing, let's do some size comparison. This is not a small knife in some ways, but it's also pretty small in others. Here it is against the Spyderco Delica, and what we see here is that this is thick, but it's actually pretty small. In terms of sharpened blade length, we are right on top of the Delica in terms of size there. Right here it is against the Ontario Rat number 2, and again, it is a relatively short knife, and it's certainly a stubby thing, again with relatively short sharpened blade length, but it is not a small knife in that dimension. And here it is against the PM2, which is actually right about the same thickness, if not, actually, no, the Thug is thicker than the PM2 still, but at the same time, it is markedly shorter. The Thug, that is. And so, yeah, this is not a particularly, it's a small knife, but it's a thick boy. That is 100% true. Next thing, this is a We knife. This is made by the We Knife Company. They are a Chinese-based company that works with a lot of designers, and in this case, it is actually being designed by Christensen Knives. I believe, well, anyways, this is a person who's done a number of different choices, or a number of different knives with a number of different companies, and interesting guy, and has a very strong defined design language, and we're seeing that come in through here. So this is a collaboration with We Knives and Christensen Knives, and let's go on ahead and talk about the good, the great, the bad, and the ugly. This very interesting knife. To start with, on the good side, it has these little pivot collars, and these look good. I'll freely admit that, right? This is a nice, attractive look, and it definitely looks a little bit more interesting than just like random pivot, screw all the way through, right? That's good, but it also functions. This functions as a lock bar over travel stop. What you see, especially in the disassembly, is that there is a little kind of ridge basically underneath there, well, not ridge, little kind of cutaway, but where if I continue pressing forward, after a point, I can't press the lock bar any further along because this pivot collar stops it. And that means that I cannot overbend the lock bar, for instance, and that can actually be very nice. That's a good idea. Next thing, this has a very nice lanyard hole, and that from this perspective it doesn't have one, and from this one it does. So it's very easy to get a lanyard in there and loop it through, but it's also not going to be something that's visible as a part of the design, generally speaking. It also has the lock bar relief on this guy is a 3-stripe sort of affair. Now, to be fair, this is going to grab on the pants a little bit more than some of the other lock bar cutouts that you're going to find, but at the same time, it looks pretty attractive, and I think this is very much a form. Maybe not over-function, but form is very much favored here, and I think that can be a thing there. And then I also like the back spacer and the fact that it really meshes along with the contours of the knife here. It's a pretty solid thing. So there are some very nice details here. I also have to say, the front of this guy is very, very clean. You've got the pivot here, which is untooled. You've got a pair of screws that are just sticking through the other side and the titanium here. It just, on the whole, it looks very clean. It looks very minimalist. And when you have the knife fully out, especially given that there's no marking on the other side here, it does have a much more clean look than you might otherwise expect. So that's nice. It is also a relatively short blade. I'll go ahead and measure it up here. What we see here is this guy is coming in just under 7 centimeters, like around 2.75 inches, probably slightly over that line. It's over the 2.5-inch line, so there are going to be municipalities here in the U.S. where this guy is illegal, oh my god. But at the same time, having a short under 3-inch blade can be legally helpful for a number of people, and also makes it a little bit less threatening to armor in the lunchroom, so to speak. And so that can be a great thing. Next thing, this has a very nice blade. It is 20 CV, which is CPM 20 CV. It's written, yeah, right there. You can just barely see it down there. Oh, come on. Camera, show me. There we go. CPM 20 CV. just barely written in there, but this is an absolutely good-to-go blade steel, right? If it's not, it is one of the best blade steels that is available these days, and so that's a great thing, but more importantly, it comes down to a reasonably thin edge here. Even though there's a little bit of a smile going on here, and so presumably it thins out a little bit further past here, this is still a relatively thin edge, and it comes out to a relatively thin edge out here. So this is a big, thick, overbuilt blade, but it actually comes down, and you can see there's a little bit of hollow in this grind. It actually comes down to a reasonably thin, slicey edge, which is great. And actually, I gotta say, this grind is cool, right? It's kind of a complex grind. We have one grind over here, then you have a second hollow grind here, and then you got the swedge on the top here, which doesn't come all the way down and is certainly not sharp, but oh boy, that's nice. I'm sorry, this part is not sharp. This part down here, yeah, that's sharp. So there is that. And so on the whole, I got to say, it is a cool-looking blade, right? 100% about that. Then finally, I'm sorry, not quite finally, the action on this guy is nice. It is very easy to deploy with a thumb stud opening mechanism here, and it is very, very smooth, especially cleaned up. Oh, yeah, this is nice. This has a very nice, smooth action. No argument there. And then finally, on the good side, this has a very interesting finish, right? Very often, Wee Knives tends to do finishes that are kind of stonewashy, a little bit dirty looking. This guy has something, I mean, I'll see if I can kind of show it off, but I mean, it's clearly machined, but there's also this sort of, it feels like maybe it was painted or dark washed or something like that, and then suddenly kind of somebody went through it with a high grit something or another and just put a little bit of streaking into it. And so as a result, it just looks really cool. Or maybe it's just something that was painted onto there. I don't know if it's going to wear away after a long time. I don't know what exactly it is, but it looks great. It's a very interesting, very different finish from Wee, and I think it gives this guy a little bit more detail. And this is a knife that I think thrives on having a lot of small details in kind of execution. It is very well executed and well finished overall. With, by the way, the blade also has a little bit of reflectivity. You can't quite see the I Am Nick Shabazz t-shirt that I'm wearing here from nickshabazz.com/merch, but at the same time, you can definitely see a fair amount of reflectivity in the blade, and so all of that to me is the good. Is that it's got interesting and nice finishing overall, a nice action, a reasonably nice blade. It's a short blade, which is legally helpful, ambidextrous thumb studs, which are nice, and some very nice details. On the great side to me, this is a very thick, overbuilt pocket knife. But the thing is, it still cuts reasonably well, right? This is a super beefy, this is meant to be kind of a sort of big, thick, beefy sort of affair, right? There is no universe in which you are going to want this for, you know, oh my God, tiny, slicey, precise cutting. That's not what it's supposed to be. This is sort of in that vein of circa 2016, 2017, overbuilt, big, thick, kind of affairs. Is, by the way, the technical term, just for those of you. But the thing is, this is something that can be done very well or can be done very badly, right? Oftentimes, small, thick, and overbuilt means it doesn't cut worth a damn, but this was ground well enough that it still cuts. It often means, oh, well, it's very, primitive finishing. No, this is very well finished. It is absolutely a thick boy. It is absolutely in that overbuilt kind of design aesthetic, but it's done well, and I gotta respect that, and to me, that's what's great here. On the bad side, to start with, it does have the blade heel, which feels relatively close to the edge here, but I gotta be honest with you, even though this is something I often complain about, this is more creepy looking than it is dangerous. I can't really get in there and touch that blade without really pushing on it, right? So that's not really a concern, even though it really looks like it could be from pictures. Next thing, this does screw right into the titanium. The clip screw and the other side here go right into the tie here. So you want to make sure that you're not over-tightening those, because if you strip out this handle, there's not a whole lot you can do about it, right? That's not a great thing. Next thing, this is $250. Now, I gotta be real here. It's pretty well finished. I'm not like, oh my God, bent out of shape about it, but it's not really a bargain either, right? It's sort of in that range of like an unimpressive price. It could be done in such a way that it's like, yeah, that's a good price. And it could be done in such a way that, yeah, you're ripping my face off here, but this is just sort of like, remember when we used to really push the bargain market? Yeah, Pepperidge Farm remembers, and so do I. And this ain't that, right? So it's not a bargain, but it's also not terrible either. Whatever, I guess okay. Next thing, this is very thick and heavy. Now look, that's kind of what it says on the tin, right? That's exactly what this is meant to do. But at the same time, being as heavy as it is, we'll go ahead and throw this guy in a scale here. We're looking at just over 2.5 inches of blade, and we're coming in at 4.37 ounces. This is a thick boy, and it's a heavy one, and there's no internal milling or anything like that designed to make it any thinner. And by the way, the balance is still reasonably okay because the blade is just as thick as the rest of it. But at the same time, it's not going to be a great choice for if you want something super lightweight to just throw in the gym shorts, so to speak. And it's also not going to be a great choice for certain kinds of cutting because the blade stock on this guy is, 0.15 inches, which is ridiculous, right? That is a blade stock thickness that I think we should have left in 2017 or so. Not everybody agrees, but especially on a small knife like this, that's not generally the way I want things to go. So you want to keep that in mind. This is not going to be the perfect thing for doing a lot of really fine cutting tasks. It is meant to be thick and heavy, and that's what you're buying. Next thing, the thumb studs on this guy are kind of in the cutting path. It's not terrible. Most of the time when you're using it, your thumb's going to be there anyways, but at the same time, it is possible for something you're cutting into to kind of get caught up on the thumb studs there. That's not something that's necessarily ideal. It's something to consider. And then finally, on the bad side, there is a bit of a recurve on this bottom edge here. If I pull out my ruler here, what you're going to see is that you can barely see it there, but there is definitely a little bit of a gap down here between the, and this could be just the sharpening choil isn't quite well done, but there is a little bit of curvature here, which is going to mean that on a flat stone, you're going to need to, well, you're probably not going to want to use a flat stone. Is it the end of the world? No, not really, but there is a little bit of a recurve there, and it doesn't really need to be. Maybe it's just meant to look a little cool. Maybe it's an accident. Who knows? But either way, not a big fan of that. So to me, that's what's bad, is that it does have a bit of a recurve on the bottom there. The thumb studs are in the cutting path. It is thick, it is heavy, it is $250. The screws are going right into the titanium here, and the blade heel, it's kind of creepy looking, but it's not dangerous. On the ugly front, there is one ugly issue, and that is this right here. The edge of this clip here is sticking right up to a point. And in most pocket knives, you see that the clip comes up, but then it rounds off a little bit at the top. Maybe there's a little bit of a flattening or something like that. That is not the case here. This is easy enough to get into and out of the pocket. That's not a problem. But as you are gripping this guy, you 100% are feeling that blade, or that little bit sticking right up into the hand there. Is it the end of the world? No, but is it comfortable? Absolutely not. So I'd like to have seen them make this a little bit longer and then flatten it off a little bit at the top, kind of come up in the curve and then flatten over here. That just would have been infinitely more comfortable. Okay, not infinitely so, but that would have been a great deal more comfortable. That would have been better. So I feel like, to me, that clip there is just not a beautiful thing. I am not a big fan of that clip in the corner there. It's a fine clip otherwise, but that's no good. That, to me, that's ugly. But final conclusions. Look, this is a knife that has kind of challenged me a little bit as a reviewer, right? And I say that for a couple of reasons, both as a disclosure and also to give you sort of a metacognitive glimpse into my life, right? As I've spent more time with it, though, I think I can kind of see both sides pretty clearly, but it's been tough. Because, look, on the good side, it's got nice details. It's got ambidextrous studs, a short blade that is legally going to be helpful in some places. It's a pretty nice blade, actually, with a pretty good grind, a nice action, interesting, and frankly well done finishing generally. And it's a design that is thick, but it's not stupid. It actually works pretty well as a pocket knife, provided you're after what it's after. It does have that blade heel lurking a little bit. The screws are going in the thigh. It's not super cheap. It's a little thick and heavy. The studs are in the cutting path. It does have that recurve there, and this clip ramp, that could be changed. But ultimately, it is a pretty well-balanced sort of design. That said, I gotta be honest with you. I absolutely hate this knife. Now, hold on. Give me a moment here before the angry comments start coming in. Oh, my God, Nick, bias. This is a knife that is basically the opposite of what I look for in a pocket knife for my daily life, right? I like smaller knives, that's for sure. But I tend to like my smaller knives to be very thin and very slicey. For instance, I have just finished earlier today reviewing this guy. This is the Tactile Knife Company Bexer. And this is basically the polar opposite of this pocket knife. As a matter of fact, I can damn near fit the entirety of this knife in between the blade gap for this one over here, right? This is what I look for in small knives. This is what this knife is. And so, to me, This is thick, heavy, gratuitous, recurved, and it's a size that I feel like should be slicey and non-threatening, that has been turned into something that is stubby and more badass looking. And so my initial thoughts out of the box, getting this guy, in the mail, were just emotionally, it basically boiled down to like, ew, no. But as a reviewer, I have to try and move past that, right? I can never be objective. Everything I say is always my opinion, but I can't let that control my perspective too much. So I carried it, right? I put it in the pocket and I gave it time. I gave it an option, and this carries, especially if you've got a really big coin pocket, this might actually fit well in there. But I carried it. I gave it time. And you know what? I still hate it. But that said, I totally get why some folks love it, because this is an aesthetic. Right? This is thick, this is beefy, this is overbuilt, this is overdone, it's badass, it's heavy, it's unapologetic. And you know what? Honestly, this is one of the better implementations of exactly that aesthetic. I dislike that aesthetic. It's not what I'm looking for. But if that is what you're looking for, this is done well. With a good build, with good grinds, and more attention to cutting than I think is the norm in that sort of world and that sort of aesthetic. So even if it is pretty much exactly not what I am looking for, I bet it is exactly for somebody else. And especially with that clip being tweaked, you know what? I can respect the way that this was done. So even if I personally hate this knife, which I do, there's no harm on that, Christensen. There's no bad feeling. It's just this is exactly what I don't want. Even if I hate it, I have no trouble recommending it. And that's a weird position to be in as a reviewer, right? Like, ew, you might want this knife, right? Because if you want what this is doing, this is pretty excellent, right? It's done pretty well. The clip needs fixed, but aside from that, this does a thing, and it does it well. And so if you are in love with the design, if you're in love with the aesthetic, and if you're in love with the feel of it, you want something that's heavy, that's thick, that's beefy, that's kind of badass looking, you know what? I'm going to go so far as to say this could be a gem for you. This is absolutely not for me, but it could very easily be a gem for you. And so you have to be buying what they are selling here, so to speak. You have to be loving what they're doing. You have to be liking what's going on here. But they've done it well. And so if you do love this, love the aesthetic, love the design, love the idea here, then you know what? I got to be real with you. This little thug might just grab you and make you empty your wallet. Wait, That's probably not what the marketing message they want. But anyways, there you go. I hope this has been interesting to you. This is, like I said, it's remarkably well done for being the thing that it's doing. And everybody's got different grinds for different kinds. Anyways, hope this has been interesting to you, and have yourselves just an absolutely wonderful rest of your day. Bye now.